Okay, we are recording.
Sahidi, do you want to kick us off then?
Yes, of course. Guys, I'm Sadie. I'm your co-host for today, and we have Alec here from Technology Connections, the YouTube
Hi.
channel. I'm gonna let Chris introduce him in a minute, but for this AMA, after the introductions and our initial questions, we're going to allow everyone to raise their hand and ask questions. So if you do have a question, raise your little Zoom hand, and please turn on your cameras for this AMA because we're going to record it, upload it later, and keep it short or we're going to cut you off. Thank you. So, Chris.
Mercilessly cut you off. Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming. For anybody who happens to be watching for posterity on YouTube for whatever reason, you probably know what Hack Club is because that's probably how you found that video. But in case you don't, this is a Hack Club AMA. Hack Club is the world's largest network of student-led education initiatives, coding clubs, hackathons, student magazines, grant programs, all kinds of fun stuff, robotics teams. And so this is a thing that we do every once in a while where we find someone that the community is really interested in speaking to, and we do our best to get them to come here. And then you guys get to ask whatever you want, and we don't pre-screen questions. We don't filter anything. This is genuinely an opportunity for you as teenagers to have a conversation with a really cool person who might be hard to access otherwise. So I first met Alec actually a few months ago at an event called ThinkerCon, which is kind of I wouldn't exactly call it a YouTube conference, but there's a lot of YouTube people there. It's mainly focused on educational stuff, and so you might imagine how I ended up there. I think Alec and I started talking on a shuttle bus about pinball. And then like an hour and a half later, we were still talking about really getting into the details of pinball machines. And the thing that I remember is that Alec had a shirt
Oh,
that
I'm
was
wearing.
actually a diagram.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you're
wearing
wearing
that
the shirt
shirt.
right
I
now.
am.
Okay,
Yeah.
he was wearing the same shirt he's wearing right now,
Yeah.
which is Alec. Can you give us a little view of the shirt?
Yeah. And stand up a
It's a
little bit here.
diagram of. Actually, you want to explain what that is?
So that's the pop bumper, or the jet bumper, or the thumper bumper, which is the bumper that when the ball hits it gets propelled away. And this is a schematic diagram of the mechanism itself, or not schematic, but functional diagram. I don't know what you'd call it actually.
So it was a great conversation already, but when we got into that part, it was so funny because Alec was explaining to me this really complicated and intricate and beautiful mechanism, but like had this diagram right there, pointing out all the parts, and so I was just like, oh man, this guy's awesome. I feel like we could really have a great conversation here, and of course the Technology Connections YouTube channel is. Well, I will say I don't watch that much YouTube. I do watch Technology Connections. It's actually my go-to folding laundry channel. So yeah. So with that little intro, I'm gonna hand it off to, let's see, Sahidi. You were asking our kickoff question, right? And then after that, we're gonna go to Reese, who is our other co-host. Sahidi, do you wanna get us started here?
Yes, of course. Okay, well, Alec, my question for you is, can you tell us a story about you as a teenager?
That is it's probably a good story for me to tell because I was an aimless person who didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life. The sort of the stuff that I knew and was interested in was clearly not marketable. Like actually being a pinball machine technician was something that I would consider doing, but that's really hard to have a career in. So I was probably in my junior year, and my career path that I chose was actually managing hotels. And I know I just skipped forward a little bit, but as a teenager, I was always just interested in how things work and trying to pick them apart and explain them to other people. And that was sort of an internal frustration that I had for many years, was that a lot of my peers were not that interested in how this stuff worked. And I made it my job to make that interesting and turn it into content. But that happened accidentally. It was just a hobby after having worked professionally in the hotel industry for a while. And I don't know, that's not a great answer to the question because I kind of veered in two directions there, but definitely nerdy teenager, definitely always just picking stuff apart, trying to figure out what cool things, just cool things.
That's really cool. And honestly, that sounds like a lot of hack lovers I know it. So I think you'd fit right in if you were part of this organization a long time ago when you were a teenager. Okay. Reese, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah. So my question is, you made a ton of really cool projects in your videos, such as evaluating a weird fridge, comparing smoke alarms, and the Sunbeam radiant toaster. What was your favorite project? What was your motivations behind it? And how did your thought process start?
Oh boy, favorite project. As far as something that I've actually built, it's probably the mechanical television video. I don't know if you might have seen that one. It's an older one. Because that was an interesting, I had never seen one because they're, they were never commercially made. And I wanted to explain the concept of how television, analog television, is just light that's moving. And I wasn't able to get a coherent image out of that thing, which is, kind of sad, but also I made it very sloppily. But that's probably, as far as like a true project, not something that I was just explaining. That's definitely my favorite thing that I've done. But as far as just like explaining things, that might be the toaster video, the Sunbeam toaster, just because it's a fascinating thing, and I'm kind of sad that we don't have anything like it available these days.
Lovely. Thank you for that answer. So now we're gonna open it up to everyone else. If you have a question for Alec, go ahead and like raise your little Zoom hand and we will call on you all one by one and let you ask your question. You can just have a good conversation. In the meantime, Alec, do you wanna here, Ryan.
Hi, Alec. I've been watching your videos for a hell of a long time.
Well,
They
thank
are
you.
really interesting. Honestly, like the toaster one was the best. I mean, why can't we have those toasters today, honestly? Um, like I've been trying to get started with some stuff myself, and like, I've always noticed that my setup is kind of janky, but that's always kind of how everything starts. And I think in one of your behind the scenes videos, you also showed how like your teleprompter setup was also a bit janky because you had the
Oh,
iPad
yeah.
and the mirror reflector. I was wondering, like, how do you get started with something when everything's like so janky? Like, is because like I feel like I'm overthinking things a little bit. Is that just something you have to like work past basically and just try to, get through your first couple of releases, videos, that sort of thing?
I don't have a great answer because Technology Connection started as a concerted effort to make a YouTube channel happen. And so while my older setups were definitely not what they are today, they were better than like the channel that I started in middle school, actually. Just because that was, I think, a little Polaroid point and shoot camera is what I started on. But I can give the advice that the number one thing to do is just do it. And the setup is important, but it's not that important. It's the content and your words and your vision that makes so much more of an impact on the video. And that's, people don't watch my videos because I have a nice camera. I don't really care that much about, like, I don't do any color grading or any of the things that some people might suggest you have to learn to do. You're going to learn it as you do it, and you're also going to learn what does and doesn't matter. So while I definitely started out with not high-end stuff, I think I started this channel started with a Pentax DSLR of some sort. It was not that important really as far as the actual physical hardware. It's so much just doing it, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. So we will take Sarvesh's question next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, I watched a couple of your videos, mostly my favorite one I think was a portable air conditioner,
Yeah.
and why you shouldn't like them. But I wanted to ask, how do you keep motivation while going through projects like these? Because I find it really hard sometimes to have motivation to do things.
It is hard, I will say. When your hobby turns into your job, you don't work-life balance is something that I've been struggling with for a long time, and I'm currently in the middle of trying to have a more logical work setup. But it is difficult. I think for me, what I do is I will not embark on a project unless I'm excited about it. So I have a long list of topics, potential topics that I maintain in a live document. And I'm not going to make those videos if I don't think I'm interested in it, because A, it's going to be hard and I won't want to do it. And B, it's not going to be that good of a video. So a lot of it really is spur of the moment, kind of like, this is something I want to show. And I think that's the best approach that I have, but it is very limiting, because that finding that motivation of like, today I'm going to do this is particularly difficult, especially when, I am by choice a one-person operation, and I'm doing writing, research, editing, filming, and each one of those steps is quite a lot of work. So to me, it is finding a way to have some passion and excitement for what you're doing, so that way you want to get it done. And unfortunately, that's not something you can make happen. You kind of, in my experience, I work around that. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a difficult thing for all of us in the creative world, I think. And that's also why I've never kept a schedule, because I know it would not work for me, but for others it does. So hopefully that's a decent answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. I really resonate with that. Alex, could you go next?
Yes. So my question is, it's less of like a meta thing and more of a like specific thing. This is like inspired by your upside down outlets video.
That was a very lazy video, by the way. I've been working on a really big project, and that was just, I need to get something out now.
Yeah.
So not
Anyway,
my
the
best
question is,
work.
what is your favorite / least favorite part of your local electrical code?
Oh, my local electrical code?
Or anything.
Well,
Like,
around Chicago, needing to do everything in conduit is really frustrating,
I can imagine.
because we can't really do DIY work without cutting your hands up, cutting through armored cable.
Is there a reason for that? Was it like insurance against a fire or something? Like, was it like a really big fire?
It's probably two things. But there was a really big fire in Chicago. You may have heard of it. It was the Great Chicago Fire. And the city is still very paranoid from fire risks. Sorry, I didn't mean to be too snarky about it. You may have heard about that, but there's a lot of legacy things that are still holding on. Like, there's many more brick structures here than there are. If you live in California and you come to Chicago, you're going to be like, why is everything brick? And that is because the whole city burned down. So some of it is probably paranoia, and some of it, people speculate, is electrical unions lobbying to make that more work, but I won't go there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Alec. So we will take Lucas Dudley's question next. Lucas Dudley, you there? All right. We will take B's question next then.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, great. I was just wondering, like, you come up with so many cool ideas for things to talk about and find just a lot of really interesting topics. I was wondering what your process is for finding all of those.
I don't know if I have a process. It's just stuff that I'm interested in, that I've read about, that I've heard about, that I've seen. And if I have a process, I do have to think through, will people care about this? Can I sell it as an interesting video? Some people would say that that's like playing to the algorithm, but I don't view it that way. I view it just like, it has to be something people are interested in. But I'm constantly on the lookout for things that I might cover. I used to do a lot of thrifting because I started a lot with audiovisual stuff. I've lost interest in that. I've kind of gone more towards concepts and things that are interesting. But sometimes people just, a fair number of times, people will send things to me that I had no idea existed, like the what is it called? The digital sound encoding thing, the PCM adapter. And I had no idea that that was a consumer product. And I was fascinated by the fact that someone could buy this and turn their beta VCR into a digital sound studio in 1977. So it's a mix of things, really. I don't have a great answer, but it always boils down to, I have things that I hear about, and if I think they're interesting enough to turn into a topic, then I'll drill down and make that happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, Lucas Dudley, I saw you raise your hand again. If you want to ask your question.
Yeah. So sorry, I was a little bit mistaken about like how the turns thing worked. But yeah. So I saw actually this is kind of relates to the plugs video, but I like a 1940s stove, by the way, which is designed to be inserted in the ground side up.
Every time someone finds one now, I'm getting tagged.
And because of that, it has almost failed.
Yeah, there's two categories of things that it seems fairly common. A refrigerator.
I guess they're just like uncommon, but not unheard of.
Yeah, uncommon but not unheard of. I don't understand refrigerators. I don't get the rationale for that unless the power cord went into the top of it.
This one is, yeah.
But then window air conditioners are another thing because usually the cord's going up to it. But yeah, I always forget, if I make a blanket statement, I'm going to be proven wrong immediately. That's, the number one way to find something out is to say something wrong on the internet. And so that they do exist, but they're certainly not that common.
Thank you, Alec. We will take Lucas Potter's question next.
Right. Audio good?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. Serious question. Where did the idea of a dishwasher video come from? How did that come to be?
Purely annoyance. Two things. Purely annoyance that I can't get powdered detergent anymore. It's like disappearing from store shelves, and it boggles my mind that everybody's just buying pods all the time. And also seeing people comment that dishwashers don't wash dishes, that they just don't work well. And I've always had this kind of pet theory in my head that they might be connected. So I was like, you know what, let's just do a deep dive on dishwashers. And so that was kind of personal annoyance, and some of my best videos come out of that, to be honest, but I have to be a little careful with getting too snarky, so I try to hold that back. But that is literally what it is, was me realizing, going to the store and like, why is it pod after pod after pod? The powder works fine. And then also explaining that if, depending on, most dishwashers are designed to have detergent in 2 different locations. So that's all that it was, really. It was just a pet peeve that turned into content.
That's a delightful reason to do anything. Thank you.
No, so true. Ryan, you want to go next?
Yes, I have another question.
Sure.
Yeah, no, so like following up on B's question, like, you get your ideas by just, annoyance of your daily life, but how do you actually research them in depth once you get those ideas? Because like a lot of the stuff is buried in like pages of technical documentation and stuff, and it's
so I don't to be quite honest, I don't research as deeply as people probably assume that I do, or at least I don't think it's that. I don't feel like I'm doing that deep of research, but the most patents are something that I rely on a lot because you can typically pick them apart and they will cite prior art and you can go back to earlier patents. But a lot of it is just me. So my channel name is called Technology Connections for two reasons. One, it is literally what I'm doing, and it's also an homage to James Burke's series Connections. But a lot of it is just a maze in my head of how different concepts connect to each other. And so it's pretty easy for me to follow the thread back to its origin point. So this is probably not a very useful answer, but it is a mix of experience and looking at technical data and patents. And honestly, a lot of it can just be, what do you call it? Browsing around on Wikipedia and looking at the original citations, which is something that I think a lot of people overlook, is never ever cite Wikipedia, but you can go to the original sources, and often they're wonderful sources that they themselves will lead you to more places. So that's part of it, definitely.
Thank you.
Sure.
Alec, following upon that, has there ever been like an idea that you've started and you've like looked into and you couldn't find enough research, or like the patent or whatever you're looking at wasn't enough for you to like pursue it?
Yeah, a few times. And there's a couple of projects that are in like perpetual limbo, but not necessarily because I can't find the answer. Is I can't find a description that I can make sense of. And if I don't understand it, I'm not going to make a video about it, because I'm not just going to regurgitate words that I've heard. You might have noticed in some of my videos, I'll kind of just be like, because of physics reasons. And that's what I'm doing. When it's like, if I can't concretely explain this, I'm not going to say anything. So it's not necessarily I can't find the information. Sometimes it's just my own limitations. It's like, I am not qualified to talk about this, so I'm not gonna. But yeah, it has stopped a few projects for sure.
Thank you. Sarvesh, ask a question.
I wanted to know what is your process for a YouTube video? I know you have like process for like ideas and stuff like that, but as someone who's made like 5 channels with like 3 videos and then given up, how do you find the motivation to keep continuing, even through like slumps and stuff like that?
I have a very step-by-step nature, and in a lot of ways it's not very sensible, and I honestly have to think through the steps because I know there are concrete steps, but typically I write very stream of consciousness. And so, which is a problem because I've only like in the last couple of years started outlining to know what I need to write about. Most of the time I just open up a Google Doc and start barfing words out and hope that it turns into a useful script. And what really slows me down is I'm reading through it as I write in my voice to know, does this work as a video? But it is very step-by-step. It's find a topic, write about the topic. Typically I'm writing while I'm researching just because it's easier to do that. And then it becomes film the talking head, listen to myself after I've edited the talking head and create a list of B-roll shots that I need, then get all those B-roll shots, then put it back in the video. So it's a very step-by-step process, and it probably shouldn't be, but it's been working, so I'm not messing with it.
Thank you, Alex. Sorry, Alec.
No worries.
We will take Samuel's question next.
Hi. So we've like talked a lot about your process for like getting a YouTube video, but my question is, how long does it usually take you to like develop an idea enough to where you know that it's a good idea that'll work?
It's all over the place. Sometimes videos go from idea to execution in literal minutes. The video that I did on photocell light controls was actually me staring at one and realizing I don't know how these work. And then I looked it up and was like, that's not at all what I expected. And when I realized this is a thermostat activated by a heater, that's a cool idea. And so went out to the store, bought some, got a script hammered out in about a day, and then made the video happen. Other projects, I know I want to talk about them, but I haven't had a great way to get into that I think will work. And sometimes they're just sometimes I overwrite and I'm working, as in like write too much, and I'm working on paring that down a little bit. There's a couple of things with like electrical concepts that I would like to talk about. So it really just depends. It's not, I wish every day were like the day when I looked outside, saw a photocell control and was like, I could look into that. But half the time it's usually somewhere in the middle. But I would say on average, probably 2 or 3 days is spent evaluating a concept on whether or not I think it can work as a video. And a lot of that is just me starting to write and to see, can I make this an interesting introduction? And is there anywhere to go? So yeah, it's another one of those, there's really no black and white to anything in this job.
Thank you, Alec. We will take Shabam's question next.
Hey there, I'm Shivam. I'm based out of the Bay Area. I know that it's very difficult for educational channels like yours to get traction, like compared to these bigger clickbaity channels like Mr. Beast or like, and especially since you do long form content. How have you sort of like managed with that? I'm guessing there must have been a struggle initially with that as well.
Well, so let's see, my first video, I have never once, and I would suggest to anybody who's looking to do this, I've never once played to the algorithm, as they say. It has always just been, I think this is a good video. I think this is an interesting thing. And so when I started, I was slogging along, just making these videos in my spare time from 2015 to 2017. I think there was 2 years where the channel just, had a few dozen views a day maybe. And then it just suddenly exploded because my video on the technology, the helical scanning technology in a VCR, but it was called The Magic Inside Your VCR, I think. That just suddenly went viral, and I don't know why. I mean, it was just one day my phone started blowing up. And so yeah, it's not something I think about really, because from my perspective, I just got really lucky. And I think a lot of us on YouTube feel the same way. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because we know that there's things that you can do, but there's also so much of it that is luck. So sorry if that's a depressing answer.
So you've just been doing what you've liked to do since the start, and that's just gained
Yeah, I would,
traction.
that's the only piece of true advice I ever feel comfortable giving to people, is that we don't really, it's kind of a little too cynical for me to try to chase the algorithm. It's just make interesting videos and people will find them.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's really cool. I think that's like a big part about, like, earlier when people were asking you like how you stuck with it, like you were just passionate about it.
Yeah, and it was like a total hobby. I liked explaining things to an audience that would listen, and that just turned into my job one day.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay, we have a question in the chat from Void, and they said, what are your thoughts on multi-use appliances?
Oh, so like small kitchen appliances, I presume. I mean, I don't really have too many strong opinions about it. I know there's people who are strongly against single-use appliances. I don't really. It's just do what works for you. The air fryers has been a thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but the setup in my head involves quite a lot of making of pizza rolls and experimentation, and I don't really want to do it. So, but yeah, I don't have strong feelings either way. Do what works for you.
Wait, could I actually just ask a quick follow up about like what is it about the air fryers that you are that grabs you here?
The fact that it's just a small convection oven with like that's really what I want to talk about, is that like is there a real difference between a quote unquote air fryer and like a toaster oven with a strong convection fan? Because it kind of seems like a nebulous definition. And so yeah, it would be one of my videos that like all this is a convection oven. And if you have a convection oven, you should try using like a wire basket in there. It might work just like an air fryer, with the downside of having to preheat longer.
That definitely sounds like a snarky Alec video.
It does. So, but it's going to be so much making of food, and I don't like wasting food, so kind of just put it off.
You're telling me you wouldn't eat all the pizza rolls?
I shouldn't. I probably would, but I shouldn't.
And we'll take Ian's question next.
Hi. You've made quite a few videos on electrical receptacles.
Yeah.
Receptacles. And I just had a less serious question. Which country do you think has the best power outlet design?
Depends on what you mean. If we're looking for safest, probably the UK, but it's also wildly over-engineered. It does not need to be quite that safe. The European Schuko plug is actually pretty good, but it's not polarized. And over there, they're like, why do they need to be polarized? I'm like, I don't know. Gives me the heebie-jeebies that they're not. So depends on what you mean by best. If you're looking for robustness, is probably the UK plug, the BS1369 or whatever it is. And then I can tell you for sure, it's not ours. Ours is not great.
Yeah.
Which one is your personal favorite?
I don't know if I really have a personal favorite. Probably just, I have seen, I think it's the Swiss design. There's an interesting one where they're arranged in a triangular pattern, and that looks nice. But, and then also the Australian plug just looks like the Scream face. I like that, but not for a technical reason, just because it's silly looking.
Really quickly, I have a small follow-up question. If there was like one modification you could make to the United States power outlet to make it like either more safer or like more functional, that wouldn't like completely transform it and like break every like appliance that people have right now, what would you suggest making?
It would be sleeving the pins, absolutely. If we could just figure out how to do that, it would solve most problems. The challenge is just there's no standardization at all as far as the internals of the receptacles. And that was actually part of the video on the why do plugs have holes in them? That was another like weird pet peeve of mine, is just seeing all these articles are like, yeah, it's a locking mechanism for the outlets. Like, but have you ever like felt it? It's not locking into anything. I just need to take it apart and show you that like that's not current information. It's probably true in the past, but they're also different on the inside, that if how much you need to sleeve them to make them safe depends on the plug they're going into. And if you sleeve them too much, that could potentially itself be a problem if it's not making good contact. So I don't know how much we can do without piecemeal just replacing them all. The plug is worse than the receptacle, but because they need to be compatible with each other, it's just a hot mess, and probably we're stuck with it.
Thank you, Alec. Aurora, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can.
Yeah. I like that. So, like, through the magic of buying two of like everything for your videos, what do you do with all the stuff after you're done with the video?
If it can be recycled, I'll recycle it. Sometimes I keep them. Sometimes they end up in the set as a prop. And actually that's the thing that I need to do some changes to the set because it's been the same for quite a while. But yeah, that started with the original toaster video, which wasn't about the Sunbeam toaster. It was just the electromagnet inside of a modern toaster. And they're so cheap. I was like, why don't I just buy two of them and it'd be easier? And that's how that started. But yeah, it's mostly a running joke at this point. But as far as what I do with the extra one, I try to dispose of it as responsibly as I can, or sometimes I hold on to it as a prop.
That's really interesting, Alec. So I would like to ask you, can you tell us the story of the Sunbeam Radiant Toaster and how it's doing today?
The video or the toaster itself?
The toaster itself.
I still use it. It's still working. The one that I use actually was not in the video because, so you might, if you're familiar with the channel Techmoan, he has what's called the Techmoan effect, where when he covers something, the price on eBay goes up. And I knew as soon as I cover this video or this toaster, they're going to become more expensive. So before I released it, I bought 5 of them. And the one that I use daily has never, it's probably showed up in a video beforehand, but it's the original design that has an Art Deco engraved pattern on the front, which is very interesting. And it still works perfectly. It continues to work just like it always should have. You know, it's got some limitations, of course. You can't do a bagel or like really thick bread, but it's still just kicking along. It's so simple, but it works.
Can you give people like a backstory on what the toaster is?
Yeah, so the heating elements in a toaster are nichrome wire. That's a nickel chrome alloy, and you just run electric current through it and it gets hot. And it's a good alloy to use because it can get very hot in open air without oxidizing. And somebody at Sunbeam, I don't remember their name, I think I cited it in the video, realized that nichrome wire stretches just a tiny little bit when it heats up, like most things do. And they designed a mechanism where the central heating element is wound around and around and around a kind of like a brace type thing. So that way the heating element is actually compressing it slightly. And then when you use the toaster, the heating element heats up, it stretches, and so it releases. And there's a series of levers and I think it's all just levers basically and hinges that translate that tiny little stretching motion into the lifters for the bread. And they put in a trip switch so that the bread just falls on this switch, it turns on the toaster, and it automatically falls into the toaster. And then when it's done, the thermostat kicks it open and sticks it back up. And then the other thing is it uses a thermostat that is actually measuring, it's pointing at the bread. So the side heating elements are different. So that way the thermostat is sitting in the middle and it reacts to how hot the bread has gotten, not how long the toaster has been in use. So despite being technology from, I think, 1947 or something like that, you can put a piece of frozen bread in there. It doesn't matter. It's going to toast it exactly like it wasn't frozen because it will literally stop at the correct temperature of the bread. And there's no levers because it just slowly falls in and slowly comes back up. It's like the most elegant toaster you've ever used, despite being 70 plus years old. And I wish they would make them again because it's fascinating.
Yeah, if I can like quickly like butt in, like the reason why the thermostat's like that is because like modern toasters, like my family has a toaster oven, and like if I want to like go for like a second waffle after I eat my first one, that it's measuring the ambient temperature, so it just like so it would like turn off really quickly and would not fully unfreeze the waffle.
Well, and some newer toasters now, like even the $8 one from Walmart, however much they go for now, there's a surprising amount of sophistication in a modern toaster. There's a little microprocessor that tracks how long the toaster has been used, and it will know if it was used recently to subtract a little bit of time, which is very clever in its own right, but it's still, the mechanism is time-based at a base level. It's not like Tom Scott got in trouble because he made a video. Well, no, sorry. Tom debunked that the numbers mean minutes or something because that's what people were talking about. They are kind of sort of correlated to time. But yeah, most modern toasters, it's not even using a thermostat anymore. But there's reasons for that because the thermostat in the Sunbeam toaster, if you use a bagel, if you're trying to toast a bagel, there's a big old hole right where the thermostat is. So it will just shut off right away. So there's nuance to everything is like my motto at this point.
Thank you, Alec. And so we have this transition in a lot of our AMAs, but as you know, we're a community of teenagers in Hack Club who work on projects together. And as teenagers, we want to flip the tables on you, and we were wondering if you have any questions for us.
Oh boy. Now this I should have been prepared for. The questions I have are probably pretty deep and meta, because when I think back to my time in high school, the world seems a lot scarier now to me than it did when I was in high school. And just wondering how y'all process that and think about that.
So, I mean, I guess like as I grow, like every new day or every new year, like there's always newer things, and like I've just accepted like change is there and change is scary. But even more scary for me is like the lack of change. Because it would be horrible if everything stayed the same. So it's trying to just move on and taking it one day at a time for me, if that's an adequate answer to that. Does anyone else have an answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, my biggest thing I always thought was in high school is to roll with the punches, because it's not like not everything's gonna go my way all the time. So, I just accept it. It's not gonna like things are gonna change, new stuff's gonna happen, but you gotta roll with it.
I feel like that's a really healthy attitude that people in my generation were not very well prepared for, because I've come across it myself, I hope. But we were sold that, I don't want to put it that way, but it's kind of like you expected the step-by-step process is this is how the world works, and then the rug kept getting pulled out from under us. And in a way, I'm kind of encouraged to hear that you're rolling with the punches already, because that I feel like that's kind of what you have to do. And if people are honest about that from the beginning, that's better.
Does anyone else have an answer?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess some of us just aren't really very good at dealing with it. Like there's I've seen there's a lot of like increased rates of depression and anxiety in my generation. Like I definitely have noticed that I have pretty bad anxiety and depression myself. So it's like it's like, yeah, it can be hard.
Yeah, and I think honestly, as a younger millennial, I've been kind of disappointed in my generation, and I can speak. I'm more hopeful from what I see from the younger folks, so hopefully that's some confidence boost.
Ryan, what do you have to say?
So, I mean, like, my answer is kind of similar to the others who are just like roll with the punches, but honestly, like, I don't the difference from them is just I try not to think about it too much. I just try to like, stay true to my own values through all the change. So it's just like, is this right in my opinion? If it's not, then I don't do it. Then I don't use it, or I don't use it, or I don't do it. It's like, I am kind of weird for my generation. I don't use TikTok or like social media apps in general. Just because I generally feel like it's kind of a mental health drain to be on them.
I will agree with that. And I've stepped back from most social media. I have been playing around on Mastodon a little bit, but there's pros and cons to that, but that's not really related to the question. But I do think in general, yeah, that's probably wise. There's a lot of, it's kind of like the new addiction is how I think of it, as not necessarily to put a value judgment on that, but like it's kind of scary to me, even just because like, I've never downloaded TikTok, but I have used YouTube Shorts, and it's kind of scary to me how it turns off my brain. And so yeah, when you say it's not common, would you think that most of your peer group is very plugged into that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. At my school, like you see people walking down the hallways on TikTok, and even during class, like during a lecture, they're on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, stuff like that. And I completely honestly agree with you on the point that like it's so easy to just like turn off your brain when you're using YouTube Shorts. Because one time I got tricked into clicking on one because the badge on those is so tiny.
Yeah.
And then like I clicked on one. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I scrolled it, and I didn't realize what I was doing until 5 videos later. and then was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary. It really
Yeah,
is.
the
So
way a big part of it is like how like they make it so easy to just like go deeper in the rabbit hole. It's just like a single finger swipe. You don't need to like scroll through the recommendations, find one you like. It's like an endless, it's like all you can eat, mind numbing.
Kind of force fed to you.
The algorithm too, it like knows more about you than you know about you. So like it knows exactly what keeps on for the longest. And even if you don't like something, skipping to a different video is just like a swipe up.
I have a bit of an alternative perspective about I know exactly what you're talking about. It even like supposedly, I was talking to other people who use TikTok that YouTube Shorts' algorithm is nowhere near as good as TikTok's. But I don't necessarily view it as, this is what I think is actually scary about it. It's not that it knows you, it's that it's confronting you with how your brain works, because you're able to see that just inputs of, I like this, I don't like this, very quickly turn into your preferences. And that's honestly the thing that kind of scares me a little bit, is realizing that like, oh, the logic of my mechanic or my biological computer that is my brain is actually pretty easy to pick apart and turn into, plugged into the matrix almost. So that's, I don't view it necessarily as scary because it's able to figure you out. I think it's scary because it reveals how easy we are to figure out.
Shaban, what do you have to say?
Regarding the whole life throwing hurdles at you, I figured out over time that things automatically resolve themselves, and most of the time you're just making a big deal out of nothing. That sort of helps like lower the perception of stress and anxiety in me.
I sort of agree with that. I like adopted this mindset of like everything happens for a reason, and it might be kind of cliche, but it pushes me through things when they're hard, and like in the end they sort of do work out on their own.
I think that's broadly true, but you do, a phrase that I've been kicking around a lot, and I use it at the end of my most recent video, is be reasonable, because I think a lot of discourse these days is missing that. It's a mix of like catastrophizing and reading deep between the lines to find things that aren't there. And I do think that people have not in general, but I do think it's too easy to lose your sense of reason. But I would say vigilance is required these days, as far as just far too much, honestly. But it is very easy to get worked up over nothing, and I see that far too often online. It's part of actually why I worry about my level of snark in my videos, is that like might not be encouraging healthy things.
Reva, what do you have to say?
I think challenges are kind of like life is handing you a way to improve. Like, I think if I end up in a challenging situation, I'm like, wow, I get to learn that skill and I get to practice that skill. And the next time I have a challenge, it's going to be easier for me. Or next time I can work on a different skill. And I get to like practice different skills and get better and improve. So challenges can be kind of fun too.
Sorry, I was just not quite sure what, if you want me to jump in there or not. Shall I?
If you want.
I will just say that I think that's a very healthy perspective, and you can always learn from things. And this is not super related, but one thing that I think is really important to recognize is finding out the control that you have and the power you have, and exercising that, and not necessarily just feeling everything is super bleak, is very important. And that's a very healthy perspective to think of things you can learn through adversity. That's how we all grow as people.
I agree with that. River, do you have a question for Alec?
Yeah, I do. It's not totally related to what we've been talking about, so I hope that's okay.
No,
But
that's
I was
totally fine.
wondering like what your thoughts were on carbon offsets as a method for climate action and where you see them in our future.
I'm not super well versed on them, but I do know most people are skeptical of them. Yeah, I would probably say like I lean more towards skepticism that it's a mechanism that can actually affect change. But there's a lot of issues in climate that it's actually, I think a lot of people overthink a lot of this stuff, and sometimes thinking about not like the climate crisis, but individual things about it. People can get very stuck in the weeds, and then we don't actually move forward. And as far as carbon offsets and things like carbon credits and stuff and that, I don't know, it feels like too much of a shell game for me. So I would probably say I'm more skeptical of that. I think just it's a really tricky problem, but I'm very hopeful just because renewable energy is immediately getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so like it's going to be the no-brainer option within the next 5 or 10 years, and the world will change for the better. Fortunately, just not as fast as we should have it change.
Can I actually jump in as a quick follow-up to that?
Sure.
I feel like the climate offset problem is just like I watched Sam from Wendover's video on it a while ago. I feel like it reflects a lot more of like the hypocritical issues within like society as a whole, honestly, because like, you know, it's just companies that are kind of greenwashing themselves to make themselves more popular in the end run.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm sympathetic to that notion, but there is something, and actually Hank Green was just talking about geoengineering, and I'm not getting on geoengineering, but the thing that I want to pick apart is there is when I talk about people overthinking things and being reasonable, there is a lot of movement for people to think that like we have to give the work to the right people, and if the wrong people are doing the work, that's bad. And I'm more of the mind that like we need the work to be done. We just need that to happen. So like when we talk about a lot of the expertise that the oil industry has could actually be useful for things like carbon capture or direct air capture and things like that, or geothermal energy and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people like, well, I don't want Shell to profit from next generation geothermal. And I am sympathetic with that perspective, but I'm kind of like, I don't really care who does it. We just need it to happen. And so that's the whole overthinking and nuance thing that I was talking about earlier. I see it a lot in spheres that I really enjoy picking around in, but it hurts my brain because it's like, we're not moving forward. We're just arguing about minutia is what it feels like to me.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Chris, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I felt like I had to get this one in here because it's such a burning question for me. But I feel like we almost skipped over it, which is I'm super curious to know, for someone like you who, you know, like your thing are these like long form, kind of epic videos that really, you know, are about depth. How are you kind of thinking about and dealing with sort of the transition to shorter content? Like, are you doing YouTube short stuff? Are you you know, do you put anything on TikTok? Like, I'm just kind of curious, like what your, you know, for lack of a better word, like strategy is here.
Don't have one, and I'm not engaging. Through talking to some colleagues, I mean, some of it is just purely that like YouTube has not figured out how to monetize shorts. And so many people move to YouTube because like they cracked the code of paying people. It's not hard. I mean, it's very hard from a technical perspective, but when we hear about other platforms, it's like, if you want people to stick around, you need to give them a reason to stick around. So some of it is just, from what I've heard, it's difficult to actually make money from YouTube shorts, but some of it is also just like, I only have so much time, and the only thing that my topics are too I could tease them in a short. I can maybe talk about one individual thing, but as far as like threading the needle from start to end, I could never do that in a short. So I just don't care. Maybe that's not a good strategy, but it's how I'm doing it. How I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, what I saw, sorry for interrupting, like what I saw, like I think it was Cathode Ray Dude, but I don't remember, like use shorts to like tease the content, like just like Cathode Ray Dude's latest series is like on how like Windows Vista started up really slow and these were different OEMs ways to combat that. And like said like tease like this is the weird computer I'm looking at in this video. The links in the comments if you want to see how it does what it does.
Yeah, and my understanding is that like conversion or actual click-through rate is just pretty abysmal on those. And it's like, I think that YouTube is very much, the worlds don't connect very well. Despite being in the same app, in the same place, it's hard to get people to move between the two. You're either zoned out and just looking at shorts, or you want to engage in long form content. And I just choose to stay in the latter.
Thank you, Alec. Okay, last question from Slack. Ian?
Hello. So, through Hack Club AMAs, for the last few years, we've had a tradition for all of our AMA guests to make a pog face, because as you know, our community of teenagers, we have an online Slack, and we have a ton of custom emojis. We have a custom emoji with a pog face of every one of our past AMA guests. We wanted to ask if you could do the same.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's sort of like, here.
Should I be sad that I don't know what that is, or should I be proud that I don't know what that is?
I also don't know what this is.
Okay, wait, Ian, demonstrate. Someone demonstrate.
Like,
oh,
wait,
why,
is it like
what
a
is
Mr. Beast face? Like an annoying thumbnail face?
No, it's a Discord thing, right? Didn't it start in Discord?
Start on Twitch.
On Twitch, okay. So what will you use this for?
A little emoji.
Just an emoji.
Okay,
It
sure.
will end
Why
up as a
not?
custom reaction in our Slack channel.
I gotcha.
What's going to happen here?
Slightly angled a little bit, like more eyes. How do we do that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Alec. I want to ask one last question before you leave. So our founder, Zach Latta, of Hack Club, who can't be here right now, but he's been a big fan of you for years. He always asks this one question to our AMA guests, so I'm just going to read it out loud. So it's a little long question, but it's
That's
kind of
fine.
okay.
I'm fine to go over a bit.
Say when you got onto this call, you didn't actually get on to Zoom and you clicked that button, but suddenly you found yourself teleported back to the year 500 BC. Okay, so you don't know how you got there, but somehow you've also realized that you've become the dictator of the world. And you realize that you're on one of 3 identical Earths in the year 500 BC. And you also realize that in 2050, which is 30-ish years from now, you're going to be there's going to be like a great war between these 3 Earths, and only one of these Earths is going to survive. Now the question is, what do you do as a dictator of the world in 500 BC, all these years ago, to best increase your Earth's chance of survival? There's 3 constraints. You're going to die, okay? So you only have the rest of your life to set this plan into motion. You can start anywhere you want, and you can assume that you speak the local language, but it's 500 BC and you're limited accordingly. And the war is inevitable. You cannot prevent the war, but you can picture the 3 Earths going into a black box and only one survives.
That's a lot, but the first thing that I think about is just that, like, if we're assuming the basic constraints of the world, language will not carry. So, like, thinking about the nuclear warning graphics that have been created to try to convince people, don't dig here, it's bad, go away. Gosh, that's really a lot. What would I do if I were dictator of the world? I would probably just figure out a way to instill the virtues of cooperation and needs fulfillment as far as like things to strive for. I don't know. I would say make a religion out of that, but that tends to get morphed over time too. So, but I don't know. That would be my bigger thing, is just trying to get people to understand that cooperation is everything. Turn that into a mantra.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Well, that's about it because it's been an hour, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. It was really inspiring, and I think everyone else can say the same thing. We really appreciate it, and we really like a big thank you from our hearts.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
This was very fun.
Can we quickly get everybody to just unmute real quick and just give Alec a round of applause? And a thank you for showing up here. This was really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Void.
Should we do a
It's
3, 2, 1?
Oh yes, can we do it? Okay, yeah. So Alec, at the end of all our calls, we do like this, like 3, 2, 1, and we all say hack, like at the end, like all together. So we could do that real quick.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Hands in, everybody. Get the fingers wiggling.
Alec, you want to count us off?
Sure. Already? 3,
3,
2,
2,
1.
1.
Hack.
Hack.
All right.